Hello and welcome to Daybreak. I'm Snigdha.
And I'm Rahil.
And in this episode, we're going to be filling you in on some of the biggest business and tech stories from the Kent's newsroom.
We'll talk about the latest from Byjus,
how Reliance's Campa Cola is taking on the Coke-Pepsi duopoly,
and finally, the battle between YouTube and streaming companies to be the next television.
Stay tuned.
This month began with an unexpected twist in the ongoing Byjus saga. We've spoken about what went down with Byjus extensively on this podcast. But through it all, its once larger-than-life founder Byju Ravindran has maintained silence. But then, late last week, Ravindran finally broke his silence on LinkedIn. I am the Byju of Byjus and I am here now. That's how he started this rather lengthy post. He then went on to make some pretty startling allegations against the lender group that sued him in a US court for non-payment and, worse yet, fraud. The lender group is a consortium called the Glass Trust. And in his post, Ravindran said he and several employees received a document with conclusive evidence of criminal collusion between the Glass Trust and EY India. That's the consulting firm involved in the EdTech's insolvency proceedings. Now, for context, we've spoken on this podcast before about how this company really took off because of its signature method of hacking examinations. Here's what the Ken reporter Olina Banerjee had told us when we spoke to her a few months ago on this show.
I think it's interesting because it's connected to who Byju Ravindran was. He was this guy who could help you crack the CAT exam, which is notoriously difficult to crack. And he did it at scale, and he did it in a way that was just, I suppose, so impressive and so impactful. I suppose people did crack the CAT after, his coaching. And that's the whole kind of mentality that he brought to his business. So on the one hand, because he was the visionary, because he could crack the code of exams and of scaling, everybody kind of listened to him. So his initial sort of group of 7 to 8 co-founders were his students, right? Were people who had studied under him. So they obviously were kind of devoted to him as a teacher, but also then as a founder. And then you can start to understand how top-down Byjus became, right? How sort of everything, all ideas, all directions flowed from the top.
But the real trouble began when Byju started applying this hack method to its growth with unrealistic sales targets and billions of dollars in loans. That's when things started to fall apart. Because soon after becoming India's hottest edtech startup valued at $22 billion in 2022, Byjus had a cataclysmic fall from grace. Interestingly, Olina happened to have received an email from a quote-unquote whistleblower just days before Ravindran's LinkedIn post came out. In a recent edition of her newsletter, EdSetGo, Olina wrote that Ravindran's post seemed to have been referencing the same email. In his post, Ravindran called for an investigation into the allegations. He wrote, "I'm sure a thorough investigation of this evidence will reveal the truth." It's important to note here that the post came on the same day a judge in a Delaware court sided with the lender group Glass Trust and held that Byjus' US subsidiary Alpha had indeed defrauded the lenders by hiding its stash of cash and transferring it out of the company. In his post, Ravindran finally addressed the whole mess. He spoke about what he and his family have gone through the past year or so. He wrote that he did everything in his capacity to stop the company from going under and how he felt immense guilt for putting his family through what he described as unimaginable misery. Anyway, it's unclear if any investigative agency will actually look into these allegations of collusion. It's also unclear whether that impacts what happens to the ruling in the US. The court's order seems to imply that Byjus may have to pay up or face a penalty for violating the law. In her newsletter, Olina writes that maybe now Byjus' spring will come from an actual round of spring cleaning within what's left of the company. And by that she means selling the American companies, paying off the debtors, and starting afresh from Ravindran's current perch in Dubai. We are going to link Olina's newsletter in the show notes of this episode. Be sure to check it out. Next up, Snigdha is going to tell you how Reliance is making the undisputed kings of India's aerated drinks markets, Pepsi and Coca-Cola, scramble for survival. Stay tuned.
Have you visited a neighborhood kirana store recently? There's something quite weird happening to Pepsi bottles at these stores. I don't know if you've noticed, but the bottles are getting fatter. The 20 rupee Pepsi bottle now has 400 ml of Pepsi instead of 250 ml. Now, if like me, you are thinking this must be some kind of a promotional thing, you, dear listener, are quite wrong. Because this is a panic move. Varun Beverages, which is Pepsi's largest bottler in India, is, well, bubbling with anxiety. So, what happened? You see, Reliance has entered the cola scene and it is trying to do what it does best, which is disrupt the market. If you remember, the company reintroduced Campa Cola, the popular homegrown soft drink brand back from the 70s and 80s, in 2022. In true Reliance style, it offered 250 ml bottles just for 10 rupees. And that is half of what Pepsi and Coke charge. The result? Kirana stores are loving the fatter margins and customers are loving the cheap sugar hit. Actually, in some states, Campa Cola has already gulped down 10% of the market. My colleague, the Ken reporter Gaurav Bagar, took a closer look at what is going on. You see, it is not just Reliance causing Pepsi headaches. Coca-Cola too is bulking up. Conglomerate Jubilant Bhartiya Group just bought a 40% stake in Coke's biggest bottler, Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverages, or HCCB. Two consumer goods analysts told the Ken that this move will only cement Coke's 50 to 55% grip on the Indian aerated drinks market. Besides, the Bhartiya Group also owns Jubilant Foodworks, which runs the pizza giant Domino's in India and sells Pepsi products at its outlets. One of the analysts also told us how this could potentially lead to a shift in partnerships, with Domino's switching from Pepsi to Coca-Cola. Meanwhile, Pepsi's bottler Varun Beverages is keeping its panic under wraps. Ravi Jaipuria, its promoter, said during an analyst call in early February that there is always a market for lower priced products and regional brands have maintained about 20% of the market in India. On an extra positive note, Jaipuria said that there is enough space for everybody to grow. But the stock market is not quite buying this argument. Over the last year, no thanks to the rising competition and a broader market correction for high private equity stocks, Varun Beverages stock has fallen by more than 20%. Even the Nifty FMCG index slipped by 3.5%, which is an unusual stumble for a company that has been on a winning streak for the last 5 years. And that is why Pepsi is quietly stuffing more cola into its bottles. The 20 rupee price point is Pepsi's stronghold. But with Reliance undercutting it from below and Coca-Cola reinforcing its empire, Pepsi is feeling the squeeze. Next up, who will become the new television? YouTube or streaming platforms? Stay tuned.
There's a war for succession going on, and there are only two challengers. On one hand, we have YouTube, and on the other, we have streaming companies like Netflix and Jio Hotstar. Neil Mohan, YouTube CEO, says this streaming platform is the clear winner. After all, TV screens have officially overtaken mobile as the quote-unquote primary device for YouTube viewing in the US. It is, as Mohan writes in his annual letter from the CEO, an indication that YouTube is the new television. It's interactive and includes things like shorts, podcasts, and live streams alongside sports, sitcoms, and talk shows that people already love. It's getting there organically by adding things like memberships, monetization tools, partner programs, and super chats. And it's letting creators play with them to create content that takes eyeballs away from linear television. On the other hand, there are streaming companies like Netflix and Jio Hotstar, who also want to become the successor for new television. They do it by owning and producing exclusive content and IP like live sports, Disney, Marvel, HBO, and a whole lot more. But only one platform can be the new TV. Which one will it be? In the latest episode of our premium podcast 2x2, hosts Praveen Gopal Krishnan and Rohin Dharmakumar discuss justice. They are joined by Swati Mohan, the ex-head of marketing at Netflix India, and Vanita Kohli Khandekar, a contributing editor for Business Standard, where she has written about media and the business of media for over 2 decades now. I'm going to play a short clip for you.
I'm going to ask on behalf of the listeners, is Swati team YouTube or team streaming companies?
Imagine if YouTube went away for S4 streaming companies. Where
Fair
would they
enough.
drop their trailer? What would happen? There is a lot of, look at the kind of content that they've been managed to get, whether it's Kota Factory, Little Things, a lot of the stuff that DBF has made, a lot of the talent that is emerging from there. It is actually fueling a lot of it, saying, hey, my audience, it's not like my audience is not the YouTube audience. And so it will be foolish to not lean into what is coming out of there. And at one level, YouTube is saying that, look, I'm a platform in the truest sense. When it came to, I will provide you a platform to show your talent, tell your story, tell it in every language now today, because they have these dubbing tools and AI tools and whatnot. They don't have content budgets, right? Their revenue model is a little bit different. So I'm uncomfortable with the pitting against in a large sense.
If you want to listen to the full episode, you can download the Ken app or find it on Apple Podcasts. A shorter, free version of it is also available across platforms. I'm adding all the relevant links to the show notes of this episode for you.
Daybreak is produced from the newsroom of the Ken, India's first subscriber-focused business news platform. What you're listening to is just a small sample of our subscriber-only offerings.
A full subscription unlocks daily long-form feature stories, newsletters, and podcast extras. Head to theken.com and click on the red subscribe button on the top of the Ken website.
Today's episode was hosted and produced by Rahel Philippos and I, Snigdha Sharma, and it was edited by Rajiv CN.